all. It's very, very mysterious, okay?
So what sort of gravitational pull is it following?
Well, wait till you find out.
Oh,
this is where it gets
the same
wild.
thing causing the wobble.
This is where it gets wild. In the same analysis, and remember, Pioneer data was coming in increments over time. Right? As you're going further out, you get more data. So it's not like you know everything right away. It's like you're figuring things out. So the first thing they found was this planet, and they initially announced it. Okay, and everyone's like, "Oh, whoa! How could that be possible?" Well, the interesting thing was that even the Kuiper Belt, a lot of the objects in the Kuiper Belt were being warped in the way that they rotate. Their mass was being warped by something else, and some postulated that this planet was enough to even impact and affect some of these Kuiper Belt objects. But there's more, though. The planet seem to be revolving around something. Okay. And again, I very much encourage people to go and see this diagram so they don't think I'm full of crap in what I'm saying right now. Because, again, this 1987 encyclopedia showed the entire diagram. But the weird thing was, it was the only place that it ever existed ever again. All the data from Pioneer was essentially scrubbed after.
What was it orbiting around?
Well, when scientists have studied the known universe, okay, I'll say that because we only have a limited view of what we can see with distant stars. But when they've studied other stars like Sirius and other ones, Canis Major, they find out that 80% of all known stars are binary or trinary, meaning that having a single star, our sun, is actually far more rare. You would have an 80% chance that wouldn't be the case.
Are you saying we are in a binary solar system? There's another star that we're not aware of?
Well,
another sun?
But the thing is that when Pioneer 10 and 11 got far enough out beyond this planet that they detected, and you can't see it, it's just based on its gravitational influences. Again, you can't see like, oh, there's a bright planet flying by. It doesn't work that way. Planets, if planets are not illuminated by some kind of an object, they're black.
Yeah.
It's just the space is black and you don't even know, except the influence it has.
Wouldn't James Webb pick it up?
Well, again, the space is infinitely difficult to pin down a very specific part, and I can get into all the Caltech studies after that support this. Okay. So this is not just one area. Okay. Caltech has since jumped on top of this, and you can go on Caltech's website and read all about how this planet is. One of the quotes I want.
What's the name of the planet?
They don't have a name. They call it Planet 10. Originally, now Planet 9, based on the demotion of Pluto. Okay. Caltech, actually, one of the astronomers there was basically said that he believes there's a 99.99 chance that it exists based on its effects on the Kuiper Belt and other gravitational effects.
And it's 4 to 5 times larger than the Earth.
Okay, so NASA announces that.
Yeah.
Then they go completely quiet. They never announce anything else ever again from Pioneer 10. In fact, all data on Pioneer 10 and 11 past the Kuiper Belt beyond this Robert Harrington's work and Thomas Van Flandern and 1987 Science and Invention Encyclopedia became the only sources. It was very bizarre. If you have something of that much importance that finds things, to not have any information is, again, screaming towards some kind of a scrubbing of information and hiding.
Why would they cover this?
Well, because they found something.
What did they find?
Well, according to the diagram in 1987 Encyclopedia, the way that Pioneer 10, and by the way, Pioneer 10 had these spectrometers on board that were literally made to detect objects, which is very interesting because if they're investigating a tilt on Uranus and Neptune, clearly they're looking for something. Okay? Well, they detect a signature that was undeniable because there's specific wording in that diagram, and it says, and I will quote, remember, Pioneer 10 and 11 went completely different directions in our solar system. They say they found equal pull. Doesn't matter where they were in our solar system. As they left, they found equal pull of something massive on our entire solar system. Something gravitationally is so powerful that it was basically influencing our entire solar system, including the sun. Okay? And what they found, they called it a dead star. Okay, now it's not a brown dwarf. It was a dead star that had essentially maybe supernovaed long ago. Whatever happened to it, it no longer had the fusion of a star like our sun, which is why you can't see it. It literally, now there's only two things that can happen to a star when it dies, right? It either explodes or it shrinks down into an unbelievably dense object. But that object still has very, very powerful gravitational influences.
Black hole.
Well, but not everything does that. Not everything just becomes a black hole. In fact, some scientists believe that those are more like at the center of galaxies and different things like that. Instead, this object was identified as a dead star, not as, and they determined that the distance, ready for this? Based on its influence at the time, and this is like 1984 or in 1983 that this data came back, because the encyclopedia came out in 87. They determined at that time that it was 50 billion miles from Earth, from the Pioneer probes. 50 billion miles, okay? Now, when that occurred, Thomas Van Flandern and Robert Harrington found out about that. Now, all I will say is that they both died of throat cancer. Not within a few years of each other, but they both died of throat cancer. They didn't smoke. It was a very mysterious thing because they were the only two people that were investigating this outer planet and potentially this binary star companion. And then there was a man named Miles Standish, who was the head of, that became a very prominent astronomer in the department. And he was like, everyone's like, wait a minute, what about this planet and all this stuff, right? Miles Standish did a bunch of calculations mathematically and was like, you know what? We made a mistake. Thomas Van Flandern made a mistake. Robert Harrington made a mistake. Turns out all the data is wrong and there's no planet that's out there.
Huh.
Boom. The thing just disappeared. And it went completely silent. Everyone's like, okay, never mind.
What's the motive? Cover this up.
Because I believe it's the entire reason why the Great Year exists and why we have resets of civilizations and why we have entire cycles of catastrophes and which is based, I believe, on what are known as the Yuga cycles out of India.
Right.
They're called the Kali Yuga cycles, based on civilizations rising and
falling.
falling.
We're in the Kali Yuga, right? But there are various Yuga cycles.
Yeah. So the Yuga cycles track the cycles of basically civilization rising and falling based on these ages during the Great Year. So you go from, you rise up to a golden age, you get wiped out, you fall back, and then you have to start up again from like an iron and bronze age, and then a silver age, and then a gold age, and then it resets itself. Well, what could possibly exist to keep a consistency of these cycles other than this? Now, think about this for a minute. If anyone's ever seen it, there's a documentary I highly recommend called The Great Year. Amazing. You can go actually watch it on YouTube. Amazing documentary. Has a great narrator who just passed away recently. Very well known. I can't remember his name off my head. But in that documentary, I believe they got one thing really, really wrong, but they got everything else right. They postulated that the Great Year was based on a dance of our binary companion, but they thought it was Sirius. Now, that makes no sense to me at all, because first of all, Sirius is so far away. It makes 50 billion miles of this binary look like it's in our backyard. So that makes zero sense to me that that's related to the Great Year and the dance of our sun. So I want to just point that out. However, what does make sense is that this dead star having this massive dance called perihelion and aphelion. Perihelion is when something comes the closest, and aphelion is when it's leaving. Well, it turns out that in the Great Year documentary, ancient civilizations believed that entire dance was based on, they called it our black sun. They called it, you ever heard of black holes, black sun,
well, David
Bowie, right?
Black sun's also kind of this age-old occult symbol.
Well, that turns out there's some truth in this, that there was knowledge of a dark star.
A partner star to our own sun. Some say the binary model confirms all of our celestial observations without the need for excessive torque or epicycle-type explanations. While the concept of a second sun challenges our present understanding of the solar system, it is hardly a new idea.
There's one sun which is part of the planetary system, and there's one sun outside the solar system. And this allows Mithras to both be the sun and also seem to be operating for the sun or on behalf of the sun.
The ancients had some knowledge on it. There's different areas. Even there's a whole bunch of areas that would be a whole part of the show. But I just want to say, and not getting that, but just say that basically that there seems to be a dance between this dead binary star with our sun, and every time that dance is based on approximately 25,000 year full cycle. Now, half of that during perihelion is 12,500 years, when it comes the closest to our sun, in which I theorize that is the reason why our sun goes through these massive energetic explosions of, if you have an object like our sun that is very, very powerful with like almost like a nuclear fusion type of energy, right? If you have a lot of energy coming towards it and gravitational influences, the only way it's going to be able to maintain itself is to be able to exhaust that energy, which is why I believe that this binary is the reason why these consistent events every 12,500 years or so, even 14, they're all in that realm, are occurring on a consistent basis.
But the yugas are different lengths, aren't they?
They're based on the rise and fall of civilizations consciously. And there's other, that's not the only factor that goes into the yugas. There's galactic center alignments, there's planetary alignments. It's not just one thing.
And so it's not the weakening of the magnetosphere of the Earth necessarily, it's the need for the sun to expel mass to a gravitational
which then
object
weakens, which in
turn then weakens.
And I believe that is what caused the entire destruction of Mars. Because Mars used to clearly have water, clearly had life, right? You can actually see some images, if the rover images are actually even from Mars, that have trilobites in some of the areas on there. And one of the very well-known and accepted theories is that Mars once had an atmosphere. It took the brunt of a massive CME event that stripped the entire atmosphere and then basically had the water evaporate out into space, and then it turned into this barren planet. But not only that, but it may have been based completely on a plasma events. And I want to just mention that there is a trench, a gorge on Mars called Vias Marineris, okay? That's like 5 times deeper than the Grand Canyon, okay? And it is, the feather design of it may actually be based on a massive type of plasma-like events which can literally impact entire planets if it's bad enough and create scarring and even mountains. Based on, they've shown studies with how electricity impacts things. They create like a feather-like environment, or they even create bulges, almost like types of emergences of land moving up and down by the types of energy that can impact it. Now, Mars is covered in billions to trillions of just these rocks scattered across the planet, all over the planet. Like they were thrown out and a lot left in the atmosphere, but then others literally fell back down onto the planet. And it looks like that planet is a perfect example of how these CME events can destroy an entire planet.
So you realize the implications of what you're saying. You're saying that NASA figured out that we're actually living in these sort of civilizational cycles that we really have no control over. They're kind of these hard resets.
Exactly.
Maybe we're headed towards one right now,
and they're
hiding it.
And in order to cover it up, they blocked all knowledge of the binary star companion so that whole cycle would not be understood.
That's insane.
Is it though?
I don't know. I mean, I need to.
If there was an asteroid,
details,
I'm not saying this in an apocalyptic way, because I would actually. The next part of this is we should talk about how I believe we may be able to prevent that.
Okay.
But what I mean is, if governments knew about a giant asteroid coming towards the Earth or a comet, would they tell everybody?
Maybe not. Maybe not.
Widespread panic.
Sure.
Complete society collapsing.
And you're of the opinion that this dead star is headed towards the sun now.
Yes.
And so, do you have, based on your
cycles of what we see in ice cores throughout Antarctica and Greenland of a consistency?
And what's your model of how much time we have left based on that?
We're right in it right now.
So,
very interesting how consciousness seems to rise at the same time that the sun starts to emit more energy. And this gets into, again, lost civilizations, what they knew.
Yeah.
Right? I actually believe that part of the function of the Great Pyramid of Giza and other structures was balancing the energy of the Earth.
Yeah.
And that maybe they had understood that these cycles exist. Because, okay, let me give you an example.
Yeah.
In Hermeticism, one of the core, there's these laws that exist. Hermeticism is ancient Greek knowledge from Hermes, which is basically just Egyptian knowledge as well. It's the same thing. They believe
because Hermes was based on
both.
Exactly.
So
the Emerald tablets.
They believed that cycles govern everything. Okay? That the law of correspondence governs everything. That there are these core concepts, right? That are woven into everything. They're just that's the way it is. That's how it's designed, right? And we can even get into the nature of that. I don't have a problem with that. But that there is an actual very intelligent design behind our universe, and that the Earth is actually a lot more important than we know. That it's part of, again, we are talking about like a soul incarnation place through Orion, and that it's not just necessarily happening everywhere else, but that this is a very important place, and that we are not the only ones that are governing that. That there's something higher that's governing the cycles here and balance, because that's everything that's shown in these artifacts and things that we're about to talk about from around Lake Vaughan. Is it literally shows the same thing over and over and over again. It shows this balancing of everything, balance, and basically teaching humanity about the nature of who we really are, and being bringing us back to the light. Like if our soul journey was basically starting at a higher place and then wandering through the darkness and then eventually returning back to the light. Again, everything's based on cycles, and it seems like we are the microcosm. Our journey here is like a microcosm of the entire macrocosm. And so we are playing a bigger role than we know. And at the same token, I believe that also lends itself to not having us be as afraid that we could just poof, be wiped off and never exist again, and it doesn't matter.
Well, you just implied that maybe the pyramid was some sort of possible preventative measure. I mean, are you familiar with Christopher Dunn?
Yeah, I am, very much so.
So does that relate to this? Because he has this theory that, the pyramid was maybe kind of an energy generation machine. He went on Rogan. I thought he made a pretty good case for himself.
I support those connections in many ways. For instance, under the Great Pyramid and under many of these structures, we have subterranean water, like aquifers, right? That are basically as a conductor, and they were covered in limestone, and they had granite, which has the quartz in it. It seems very much a function of geometry and physics to create something.
So, but how would that save the Earth?
Well, it didn't.
This massive Death Star.
Well, it didn't.
Yeah.
And let me give you an example. If you go to Saqqara, Egypt, right, you can go down to what's called the Serapeum. I'm sure you've heard of that, right?
Actually,
okay, so the Serapeum is this subterranean area. You can go there today. They do tours down there. And you walk down in all these steps to go down in there, and you have these chambers under the ground that were carved out. And in those chambers are these giant granite boxes, okay, built out of granite that came from Aswan. And the granite is so large that it's bigger than the entrances to even go down in these places, which is completely mysterious on how they carved them, moved them, because these granite boxes weigh up to 100 tons. 1 ton is 2,000 pounds.
Yep.
They're very, very mysterious. But anyway, there's a whole multitude of these down there, and they have no evidence of any pharaoh or anyone being in them, like finding a mummy or anything, right? These chambers are mysterious, but what is interesting about them is that many of them were found blown up, like exploded. Like a lot of energy had surged through and blown them up. And if that's the case, then one of the things we're discussing is that maybe Egypt played a really pivotal role in trying to balance energy somehow. Now, that's based on what are called ley lines. Now, geodesy is also based on that concept, is that the Earth is what's called a toroidal field of energy, okay? So the energy of the Earth, based on its magnetism properties, the energy flows out from Antarctica, down, and comes up and in from the Arctic up in the north. So it's like this, right? Comes down like that. And that if you were able to understand the properties of geodesy and properties of ley lines, that you could somehow build in specific places and maybe even balance them, harness them, have a way to build in coherence with the Earth and the stars.
But if you have a massive coronal mass ejection heading towards the Earth, how much balancing can save you?
Well, perhaps they tried. Or they just were trying to survive, understanding that there was a previous event that their ancestors had known about.
Right.
And that gets into the entire discussion of Derinkuyu and Kaimakli.
Okay.
Do you know where Derinkuyu and Kaimakli are?
No, who are they?
Well, they're locations.
Okay.
Okay, so this again gives the evidence for that the ancient people knew about these events. Okay?
Derinkuyu is the underground tunnels in Turkey. Yeah.
So...
yeah, and Hancock even talks about how, possibly a civilization went underneath there to protect themselves.
A lot of people
cataclysm.
Don't talk about Kaimakli, and I want to talk about both because the connection they have is absolutely fascinating. In southern Turkey, there's an area of soft volcanic stone. Now, most of the time, volcanic stone is hard, but this area, it was like a type of very soft kind of volcanic porous type of material that was actually really easy to carve. And it seems as though ancient civilizations, if they were global, which I believe they were, seem to know that was the only place in the Earth, based on its elevation, its location, and the stone, that they could easily, well, we say easily, but relatively easy compared to other environments, create massive subterranean areas. And I mean massive. And so within the last 40 years, there was a man in the city that became the underground city of Derinkuyu, because there's this modern city built right on top of it. That's what's wild, is that they're like living right above it and they didn't even know. He's basically working on his apartment, and he knocks a wall down accidentally, and he opens up this doorway opening that he was like trying to figure out what happened, because he had chickens that wandered in and disappeared. It was really funny, actually. And he didn't understand where they were going or whatever. And so he went down in, and he ends up going and, calling and be like, I found something, archaeologists, you got to come see this. So they come over, and they were stunned to find the largest subterranean underground city. We call it a city, but subterranean area in the world. It had something like 30 levels of these interchanging tunnels, but like rooms that had air shafts, had entire ways to block off and seal the outside with these multi-ton stones that were basically fitted so you could roll them in front of the door. And they had areas for animals and places for like education, like schools, and they had places for bedding and living and food storage. And they went to such great lengths that they built these underground cities so big that they could house over 20,000 people.
That's crazy.
At one time.
How big are they?
They're basically kilometers down.
Wow.
They're enormous.
Kilometers down, how far, like wide?
Kilometer wide, like kilometer down. I don't have the exact dimensions of it. They're enormous, though. Yeah. Okay, and you can still go there today, and there's a tourist attraction where you can obviously go down into Derinkuyu, but they only let you see a couple levels. Uh-huh. Now, here's the wild thing.
Who figured out that 20,000 number?
They went, and archaeologists that have access to all the levels have basically determined how many people could live in all of them. They mapped them out. You can actually find online diagrams where they show all of them interconnected. But it gets even more wild than that.
Yeah.
Derinkuyu is not the only one. Turns out there's a whole bunch of underground cities in that region, but there's two main ones. The sister city to Derinkuyu is called Kaimakli.